Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for Closing the Wealth Gap. The one show, maybe the only show that shows you how to close the wealth gap in your own life with the man who's done it for many, our wealth coach himself, Tyrone French. Hey, Tyrone.
Hey, Paul. Hey, good to be back, buddy.
Good to be here.
A lot is going on right now.
Let me get my mic out of my face here. Okay, there, that looks better.
Yeah, we're going to get to it. But first thing I want to do, like I always do, is I want to address the audience, let them know how much I appreciate them, as far as tuning in. And now you can literally just, go to YouTube, check out our live stream, octalkradio.net. Hit the like button if you like what you've heard, subscribe. And, we're coming to you as far as trying to put out relevant content, things that you can actually use in your day-to-day life. And I'm going to tell you right now, Paul, I heard something a couple of weeks ago, but it became more prevalent, where we're getting to that point where we're coming back to that. We live in a boom-bust society based on our economic structure.
We sure do.
And we've been in a boom cycle for so long, and a lot of people assume, they're even saying that the boom cycle has been inflated, it's been manufactured, but now we're coming to the end of that cycle. And the way we know that we're coming to the end of that cycle is now the reports are starting to go out, and we talked about this on the show before, where banks they're going to start pulling back on their credit. The credit that they're offering, lines of credit, HELOCs. And, I want to talk about that today.
Because I don't think anybody's ready for that.
They're not ready for it.
And can I set it up? Because one time you said today's topic, and I had a flashback. You know how I'm not an old Vietnam War veteran, although I could have been. A couple more years, I would have been there. So, I have flashbacks once in a while to the 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s. I had a huge flashback to not just the Great Recession of, say, 10 years ago, but before that, in the 90s, we had a couple other big recessions, one or two. And in
1987, the stock market crashed.
In 1987, I'm probably thinking that. Then right after the 90s, there was forgotten, not as big as the last couple, but everybody's like, oh my God, the earth's falling.
Yes.
Sky's falling. I remember at the time, both times this happened, that all of a sudden I got a little notice in the mail. Your credit line has been cut in half. What did I do? And at the same time, the interest rates that you're going to pay on the current balance have gone
skyrocket. They go up.
What did I do?
Here's the thing.
I'm a good customer.
Like I say, man, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
It sure does.
And then, it's almost like the Four Tops, and it's in unison, and everybody starts rocking to it. But if you're if you're an average student of history and just going back and seeing how things happened a decade ago or 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, you can almost plot those trends and say, wow, this happened before, and it's happened a couple of times. Maybe it can happen again.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, we got a lot of people that follow us that are Christians. That they read the Bible.
Me too.
And again, I'll tell anybody up front, I'm not a Bible scholar or anything like that, but there's so much good information in that book. I hear people say that it's outdated, but it's the laws and the principles that are in that book that are timeless.
Yes.
And they bring those laws and principles out based on stories.
Yes.
And there's a story, and I'm not going to get into the full story, but there was a guy named Joseph. And his brothers had left him for dead, and he had a bun deal. He was actually being accused of sexual assault, ended up getting thrown in prison. And at the time, the king had a bad dream, and he wanted this dream to be interpreted. And again, you can always go to the Bible and check out the story and everything. I'm not going to get into all the details. But anyway, the bottom line was he found out there was somebody in his jail that can interpret dreams. Mm-hmm. So he had this young guy, Joseph, come and interpret the dream for him. And what he was saying is that, based on that dream, there was 7 years of plenty, but there was also 7 years of drought. And what he advised the king to do, say, hey, based on the dream, the interpretation of your dream, there's going to be 7 years of drought coming. And what you need to do is prepare for this drought.
Yes.
And what the king ended up doing was taking this prisoner that was accused of sexual assault and made him the number 2 guy in the kingdom. And what Egypt did at the time was they stored up all this grain. And when the 7 years of drought and 7 years of famine came, all the people from all over that region had to come to Egypt to get food. Mm-hmm. Now, Egypt was not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. What they were doing is they were trading grain. They were using grain as barter. And what they were doing is, again, if you had land, or if you had, crop, if you had, cattle, if you had anything that you could trade with, then you got this grain. Mm-hmm. And so during that period of time, Egypt became extremely wealthy. Now, how does that relate to today? Based on the boom and bust cycles, there's a 7-year cycle of boom and bust periods in the United States. And so it's always a time of plenty for the wealthy.
Say that again.
No ands or buts about it.
They don't go through the ups and downs that we do. They have either a surplus or a bank behind. They have some storage behind them to suffer through the tough times.
It's called capital. They have capital behind them because what they're doing, it's like if you go to Walmart and you go to Kmart or something like that, you see a clearance rack.
Yeah, right.
And it's a red tag on it.
Right.
And everything is on sale. And I don't care. It could be a designer item, whatever it is, it's on sale. Well, during time of, the boom bust cycle, during the bust period, that's the clearance. That's the time when everything is on sale for the wealthy people. And I'll give you an example.
Boy, that's a powerful way to put it. That's just their clearance sale. They're waiting for that summer sale that we call the Depression.
And they will tell you that. They'll tell, like Robert Kiyosaki wrote this book, excellent book called Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah. Obviously.
And he followed it up with a book called The Cash Flow Quadrant, where and he talks about the cash flow as far as this quadrant where E represents employee, S represents self-employed. And that's the left side of the quadrant. The right side is for the BNI, which is business owners and investors. Mm-hmm. And what he tells people based on that mindset is you want to be on the BI side because that's where all of the benefits are. That's where the tax breaks are. That's where everything is.
You add one more to the letter to that BI side and you got big.
Exactly. Never looked at it like that. But again, if you're on the BI side, you're waiting for that bust cycle because everything is on sale. And so what happens is you'll see that during the boom cycles, the interest rates, as far as wealthy people and rich people borrowing money, the banks are giving that money away to them because the interest rates are so low. Mm-hmm. So it's free money. Mm-hmm. So they have free money to store up during these cycles where their money is making money. And then when the market crashes, when real estate crashes and everything is at a discount, that's when they leap in and they start to buy. And then once we get out of that bust cycle and everything, the recession starts to ease a little bit, then interest rates start going up again. Prices of real estate start going up again. Stock prices start going up again. They sell.
They sell to us suckers.
Well, most people in the United States, based on a lack of financial literacy, they're conditioned to jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And so what they're going to do is they're going to buy
either way
when prices are high.
When it's going up, I got to get in on it. When it's going down, I got to get out. And
I got to get out of it. Yeah. Whereas the savvy investors, when it's going down, they know to buy more.
Yeah.
So instead of getting out of it, it's like, wow, this stuff is really cheap. Let me buy more. But the average person will say, I'm losing money that I don't have. Let me get out.
And when people come knocking at your door and say, I'm going to give you twice for that house, twice for that stock, they say, it's yours. I'll take the cash and wait for you to come back in 6 months and sell it to me all over again for half the price.
And that's the boom bust cycle. That's the psychology that's happening. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you just took the time to educate yourself, to get the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding of what's going on, then you could play this game too. And I call it a game because that's what it is.
That's what it is. It really is. You know, you can cry about it. You can shake your fist at it. You can say how awful it is or unfair it is, or you can play.
Or you can play. And while everybody is playing checkers, these guys are playing chess.
Yeah,
These guys
three-dimensional chess.
and women are playing chess.
Three-dimensional chess all over the place here. Like Spock
And
in Star Trek, three-dimensional chess. Yeah, exactly.
yes, and they're doing it not as individuals, but as corporations,
Yeah.
as companies, because that's where the tax advantages are.
So let's go back to this credit line thing, because this is
Yes.
I've seen it starting to happen, or I've heard it start. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I remember vividly when you said that. Oh, that was the sign bad things are ahead. When they looked ahead and said, we're going to reduce our potential liability here. We're going to make it harder to borrow money here, even for good customers. I didn't do, you know, normally you think I caused this myself. I missed payments. I did something, and as a penalty, they cut me back. They cut me back, the good guys, because they wanted to cut their liability. They didn't want to have as much credit floating around out there that they might have to cover.
They see all of the defaults that are coming. They're forecasting.
Yeah.
And they see they know that a lot of people, again, they're dependent on credit because their income stops before the end of the month.
Yeah.
So they supplement that with credit. But if that income drops and they don't have another source of income, then what people are going to do is, again, they're not going to pay their bills. They're not going to pay it.
Yeah.
And so the problem is, even though you were, like I said, no fault of your own, you paid all your bills on time. Let's say if you had a $4,000 line of credit, let's just take it home.
Right.
You got a credit card, and it's got a $4,000 credit limit on it. Well, one day you're going to wake up and your credit limit is going to be $2,000.
Exactly.
But think about this. You were already at maybe a $3,000 limit or a $3,000 balance on your credit card. So you had about $1,000 left. So your utilization at that point of your credit was 75%.
And it changed my credit score because all of a sudden my utilization.
That's what I'm getting to. It's going to affect your credit. No fault of your own. It's going to affect your credit score. So now you're over that limit. And so now that your credit score is dropped, guess what? Your credit score can drop overnight.
Oh.
But it could take you months and sometimes years to recover from.
So let me give you a tangible example. So that year I went out and leased a car, and that's how I discovered this. And they said, well, I thought I had, good credit, whatever good credit, 700, let's say, or something, a good credit card. I went and I had like 600 or 620 or something, way down from where it was. And maybe not 600, but it was substantially down. And so they said, oh, after I negotiated the whole thing and I'm ready to sign the paper, it's another $100 a month for your car. Why? I got good credit. Oh, no. Your credit's gone down. Why did my credit go down? I didn't default. I didn't do anything. Well, your credit utilization went up. Why? I didn't buy anything. Because you used to have this much credit. Now you have a lot less credit. And whatever that balance is looks bigger against that little amount there. Suddenly I was using more of a littler. And I said, how did this happen? And they went,
exactly.
I don't know, Mr. Roberts, but it's another $100 a month for the next 4 years.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is that if you had a $4,000 credit limit and you were utilizing 75% of that, meaning that you had a $3,000 balance, the minute that drops down to $2,000, your utilization is 100%. So
and nobody sent me a note. If they did, I didn't see that they cut my credit. I didn't see how it affected my credit report.
But a lot of times you're not going to read it because you're paying your bills on time.
Yeah, I threw it away. So instead I walk in and I'm shocked and this is after a couple hours of negotiating this thing, driving it, trying them all excited and ready to sign the deal. Oops, at that last moment as you go into financing, hey, I'm sorry, we just ran your credit report and we can't do the deal. We said it's another $100. It was like $100 or $75 more a month for 4 years. And I was infuriated. What am I going to do? Walk out?
So Paul, that was extremely relevant then, but when you look at the signs of the time right now and what happened with COVID and the unemployment rate, and now people have leverage now. They can literally get more money, for certain positions. So when you got two applicants and they're looking at these applicants and they're equal,
Yeah. Oh,
but all of a
that's
sudden they look at their credit rating, their
oh,
credit scores.
yikes.
That could be a determining factor whether you get that job or not. Forget about trying to get finance, for a house or a
Car.
car or anything. We're talking about generating your income again.
So good, even people who've paid the bills on time, been careful about their spending, all the things one of the things you're always trying to preach, don't spend like a drunken sailor, pay attention to what you're doing. People who thought they had it figured out suddenly get the rug pulled out from under them because the bank cut your credit card limit and your utilization suddenly looked different. You're using more of a smaller line of credit, and
Absolutely.
suddenly your credit score, unbeknownst to you, went down significantly.
And here's the kicker. Now that you're down, this is where they kick you in your teeth
Yeah.
because they know you don't have a reserve. They know you don't have a savings. They know that you don't have anything to fall back on.
Why would I get 1% saving it? But I better to just go out and invest it and buy something here. I don't get anything from that saving account.
If you look at what happened in 1929, prior to 1929, a lot of people would save a lot of their money in life insurance,
Yes.
in insurance products, whole life insurance. And that's another show. We're not going to get into all that right now, but that was the mindset back then as far as having that capital reserve as far as an emergency or using that money to start businesses and things. But then the rate of return on that wasn't as much as investing in the stock market.
Right.
And
It
so
was
when I
steady,
look at,
but it was small. It took like a savings bond from the Treasury Department. Another thing people give you when you're a kid, a savings bond, 20 years, it was worth something. You had to hold it forever.
Exactly.
It grew
Exactly.
over time.
Over time. So, but the stock market back in 1929 became sexy, and everybody was in the market, and so they didn't have a whole lot of savings. And so when the stock market crashed, and the New York Fed, when the Federal Reserve Bank didn't inject all that money back into the system,
Unlike the
because
last time, unlike this, the last two crises where especially this one, where they just went and pumped a bunch of money into to rescue everybody here.
they call it quantitative easing. Yeah,
Right.
but what that
Why,
does
why do
is
they all?
automatically,
Why do they all give it a name that nobody understands? Quantitative easing. Who knows that? Why
because
did they?
most people are financially illiterate in this country. So if you don't understand what's going on, it's not relevant to you.
Can I
So
tell you?
anyway,
All right.
let me touch on this point because it's very important as far as people putting themselves in a position whereas they can overcome what's about to happen, because it really is a mindset.
What is
and it's a way of
about to
doing
happen,
business.
folks? Did you just see a red light blinking in the back here? Tyrone is giving you a warning sign here. It's about to happen.
Yes. So when the stock market crashes, and you're on paper, your net worth is dwindling, and you don't have the credit to fall back on, and you don't have the reserves to fall back on, then you're going to be in a world of hurt. Now, we at the same time, there's another crisis going on with evictions.
What you
So a
talked
lot
about the
of
last
people-
time, yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of people don't have they don't have the money to pay the rent. Some people don't have the money to pay their mortgages, and so homelessness is going to increase.
And rents are
Because-
going up at a time when people are struggling to pay what they already have to pay. I just read this morning across the country, rents are going up. That seems to be counterintuitive. People are struggling to pay, and yet, and I guess it's because housing's gone up. You got no choice.
So Paul, that goes back, and we talked about this on a few other shows, talking about as far as inflation. These prices are going to go up to whereas I don't care if it's rent, food, gas, all these prices are going to go up to whereas a lot of people are not going to be they're not going to be able to afford their standard of living. So again, that goes back to the wealth gap as far as the haves and the have-nots. We've been talking about this for I don't know how long.
Yeah.
That's the name of the show.
Right.
So you have to be able to position yourself in the future to whereas you have things that you can barter with. I'm not saying that the economy is going to collapse. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is the wealth gap is going to get wider and wider and wider. So you're going to have people that's doing extremely well, and then you're going to have people that's doing extremely poor.
Yeah.
and they're barely
And
gonna be
both groups
making
are
it.
growing. The rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer.
Exactly. So what do I? My thing is, you in the future, you're gonna have to set yourself up to whereas you're playing chess, and if what you're doing is not working for you, you have to come to that realization of saying this is not working. So you need to stop. If if you're not in that, if you're, let's say you're 50 years old, 40 or 50 years old, and you're still living payday to payday. You're still following all the rules and all the paradigms, and you're still, you don't really like your job. You don't really have enough money, it's, saved up for retirement. You don't see where you can literally get the training that you need to pivot to another career. Then all of those, that's feedback. That's life telling you that the decisions that you're making are not efficient based on what your aspirations are. So you have to take the time, you have to stop and ask yourself, how do I fix this problem? So kind of look at it like going to the doctor. You go to your general practitioner and the doctor tells you, hey, we got something going on
Right.
and we need to send you to a specialist to check it out. You're not going to sit there and try to self-diagnose yourself and
No,
try to solve the problem.
not at that point.
Not at that point. So, and even if you were, I mean, it's just like somebody going to court and without having legal representation. Uh, the judge, the judge may not say it, but they're looking at an idiot.
Yeah. They treat you that way.
They treat you that way because you didn't come in there with the right representation to get the best outcome that you could get. You thought you could do it yourself. It's almost like somebody having they're buying a property, or they have this property and they start having plumbing problems, and they're not a plumber. They've never been trained in plummetry of being a plumber, but they go out and try to do all this plumbing and just make matters worse. So in the future, you're going to have to pair up with somebody that has that information, that has the experience, that can literally look at your situation and give you a professional, qualified information to say, hey, look, this is where you are. This is where you'd like to be. We can put a plan in place to help you get from point A to point
But
B
the
to
problem is
point.
I don't know anybody like that. Who could coach me like that? Who could give me a plan? Who could show me the way? I'm looking for somebody, wandering around looking for somebody to help me here. Help
Well, I
me
tell
out.
you what, I'm a little biased,
Maybe.
but there's this guy. His name is Tyrone French.
I've heard of him.
He
He has a show.
has a coaching program, closing the wealth gap coach. I would recommend anybody to go to that website. Just take a look. Just get the information. It's not for everybody because again, it's a mindset. And
You know why
if
it's
you
not for everybody? It's not because everybody. I'm gonna interject this because too often people say, "Well, it's not for everybody." That means, well, yeah, because I'm stupid, I'm poor, it's only for the wealthy, it's only for the privileged, it's only for the few. This whole podcast, this whole show, this whole radio show, your whole life is about ordinary people, everyday people getting ordinary wealth.
ordinary wealth.
Ordinary wealth. Wealth shouldn't be an extraordinary thing for only a few. We all should have the way to. If you define wealth as having more than you need, an abundance of some sort, then we all should have a reserve. We all should have an abundance, unless we live in a world. Let's talk about it for a second. Because I think this goes to core of it. This is we're getting a little religious here. Do we live in a world of abundance, or do we live in a world of scarcity?
We live in a world of abundance. When you understand how everything works, and how the synergy of everything, it's abundance. If you even if you just thought about the thoughts that you have on a daily basis, you have hundreds of thousands of thoughts on a daily basis, and they're unlimited based on what you can think about. The issue is application. The issue is being able to make sure that you're having the right thoughts, and you're applying those thoughts to whereas now you're manifesting. And the only reason I said that is you're right. It's ordinary wealth for everyday people. But the issue is what's easy to do, Paul, is easy not to do.
Easy. And I think it goes back to not just laziness, because then you're shaming me again. You're just too lazy. You're too dumb. You won't take the time, or too busy, or whatever. It's part of a belief, I think. We've
The
talked about
belief
it,
system.
that whether
Yes.
you believe it can really happen. Because I tell you what, I look around every day and I see scarcity, longer lines to buy things, shorter supplies of refrigerators. It takes longer because of COVID or something here. I see longer lines, shorter supplies, less credit they're going to give me. I feel like it's a shrinking world and I got to fight for everything I get. Somebody's trying to take it all away from me all the time here.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And again, we're going to wrap this up.
Yes.
So, but I do want to interject because you just said something that's extremely important. What a lot of people see, they'll look at their financial situation and they'll say, well, this is hopeless.
Yes.
And I'm never going to get to the point where, I have all the things that I want.
Mhm.
Well, let me tell you how wealthy people think. It took them generations to get to the point to where they are. So the first person, or we call it first generational wealth, they didn't reap the benefits of all the things that their kids and their grandkids are reaping as of today. But what they did was they got the ball rolling.
Yes.
And so what I encourage my listeners to do, get the ball rolling and put yourself in a position to where as you're passing down wealth to the next generation so that they have way more
They're starting ahead.
as far as resources and assets that you could have you never even imagined
I'll give
that it
you
could
a
have gone in that direction.
strange story, but it stuck in my mind. One time I went down to New Orleans and went out to the big old plantations out there, which, I know were horrible places and when horrible things happen, but they were beautiful buildings. And this one guy who was a planter there planted, it's called Oak Alley, you can look it up, he planted some oak trees. And he knew they would grow together to form an alley down to the river from his beautiful house.
Yes.
And the guide, as I'm going through it, said, you got to realize, though, an oak tree takes 100 years to grow. So he knew he would never see what he was doing. He could only vision. He was planting a seed for some future generation to see. And to this day, it's a spectacular sight, this alley of oaks that he had it in his head to start way back when.
Again, it's a mindset.
Yeah.
It's a mindset.
And a horizon.
And-
How far are you looking in the horizon? Am I looking today, tomorrow? Too often we're caught in the today world, the minute, right now, this second.
And that's what causes a lot of the hopelessness, because if you look at your situation, if you look at the circumstances right now, and it's not good, again, that creates an emotion of fear and desperation. So that's why you have to look inward. You don't allow the circumstance to dictate, or your circumstances to dictate how you're going to perceive life. You perceive life from the inside out, not from the outside in. You take control of that. And that's why, and again, we're going to wrap this up, but that's why I have these 7 steps that anybody can incorporate in their life. And the first thing is you start out with the word, or you can call it a thought. You can call it an idea. That is the ground level. I call that 0. That is ground 0.
You got to hear something.
You got the first step. The first step is that you have to hear that word or that idea, which step number 1, which leads to your level of, we talked about, which is your level of belief. You have to get to the point where you believe it, because you can say something consciously and receive something in the conscious mind. But if the subconscious mind, if they're not on the same page, the subconscious mind is always going to override that.
Don't believe it. Ain't going to happen to me.
Doesn't believe it. Ain't going to happen. So then so it starts out with hearing, believing. Then all of a sudden you have to speak that word, which reinforces, Napoleon Hill called it auto-suggestion. It reinforces that belief system that you have, which catapults you into activity. That's the 4th step. Mm-hmm. Once you get into activity, then you persist. You
gotta continue. Stick to it. Not easy.
You got to keep going. You got to push through it until it manifests. And once it manifests, once you've achieved that thing, then you have to take a moment to rest. That's the 7th step, which is to rest. And another word that I looked at that you can use for rest, just add an E to rest, which is reset.
Ooh, I like that.
It's time to reset which is now going back to ground zero, which is the idea, the thought, or the word.
Well, my friend, my coach, my inspiration, you're going to have to reset the clock here because we're out of time. I just see more and more. I'm beginning to see the bigger picture here, and I'm beginning to see some dangerous signs ahead. You talked about the coming eviction apocalypse when the government finally removes the support they've been giving people who couldn't pay the bills and haven't paid their bills. You talk about the cut in credit lines. We've talked. We should do a show on the tightening supplies of things. Toyota just announced today, we're doing this in the middle of August, that they're going to cut their production in half because they can't get little computer chips right now.
Yes.
All of this is going to make prices rise, and the amount of money the government's stuck into the system, inflation, those double whammy there, inflation and cut back in productions, cut back in credit. Wow, look out. Things are coming. You better be ready.
And that seems like a scary forecast if you don't have the wisdom, the understanding, and the knowledge to how to navigate it. If you have the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding of how, these are happy times.
A storm is only scary if you're not prepared for it.
If you're not prepared for it. Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm prepared to do more. How do people find you if they want to get prepared and learn more?
Again, what I want you to do, and again, I really appreciate people, taking the time to listen to this podcast. Go to YouTube, check it out, OC Talk Radio. If you like the information, just like it or, click on subscribe.
Share it.
But, share it. But you can have my business in the palm of your hand, which is my mobile app. It's not going to take up any room on your phone. Just go to text closing the wealth gap to 36260. Again, let me repeat that. Text closing the wealth gap to 36260, or just go, if you're online, go to closingthewealthgap.coach. If you just, want to give me a call 562-498-4316. But at my website, all of my information is right there. All my contact information is there. And again, you don't have to go through this alone. This is a labor of love for me, for Paul. OC Talk Radio is putting this content out for a reason. These do not have to be scary times for you and your family. So but you gotta. And Napoleon Hill wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. But before that, he wrote a book called The Law of Success. He said real power is organized effort.
Organized effort. Yeah.
Organized effort. So
start today.
Two people can represent that organized effort, that level of power.
Well, there was a guy a couple thousand years ago, and he only had 12 people, and he changed the world.
Yeah, what was that guy's name?
I forget that guy's name. I'll think of it in a minute here. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. Come back again. That's our show for this week. Closing the Wealth Gap. The one show, the only show that shows you how to take control of your financial future. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net.